Recording in progress.
Hello, steel guys, people out there, the community of the steel. Jim Glenn here. It's the 16th, or excuse me, it's the 9th. I was prepping for next week's, so it's the 6th, the 9th still. We're at the 9th of September, 11 a.m. Central Time here. We've got everything working, everything's up and going. We've tested all the chats. So we are monitoring the chat on our Zoom call. If you're on the Zoom call, you can type in the chat there. We've got also we've got the YouTube channel and the LinkedIn channel that we're monitoring the chat. So welcome. Let us know where you're logged in from. If you got a chance, just type it in one of those and I'll try to look that up. So anyway, today we're discussing the last week's worth of news in the metal supply chain. And what we kind of do is we facilitate a discussion. We're here to talk about the supply chain of metals, what's going on. You know, we've been in business since 1981 in the manufacturer's rep business, and we've been third generation steel. So our grandfather was in the steel business, but it's the way we kind of facilitate that discussion of the supply chain. We start at the top of the supply chain, the mining of ores and things like that, and then we work our way down through to the mills, and then to the service centers, and then to the end users. So we talk about it in that kind of format. We've done a little search of the news in the last week, and got some topics to try to talk about. But let me bring in Scott Glenn, my brother and business partner. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Jim. How you doing? And welcome everybody who's joining in on the conversation. We look forward to hopefully having some interaction with some questions and discussions. That's what we're here for. So welcome everybody.
Yeah, and with that, we might as well just kind of get right on into it. One of the things I like to do is we have a little outline of the process, which I kind of just described. And we can kind of put that up here and have a little bit of both. So might flip back and forth if one of us is talking and get some information. We might want to put that up there and just throw our cam up there. But to begin with here, the mining and the news, we kind of did the AI search of the news for the last week. And it puts together a little topic. And I think this is one thing that's kind of been, as we've been doing this now consistently for the last 4 weeks or so, I've been watching and seeing the iron ore has been a let me also, I think, back up, Scott. We were talking this morning about how this metal supply chain we want to facilitate the discussion, and we want to move things down through the supply chain. So the base, we kind of looked at the commodity stuff, and so you've got all the iron ore, you've got nickel and stainless, you got molybdenum, so all of it comes out of the ground. We have to kind of watch those elements. So by the way, a little pitch for our community, our Steel Guys community, we do have an economic data report which we compile that includes a lot of those metals and things on one page, and has links to the sources that we have, so you can go do research on those things. But it's got a little list of day over day, a day over week, and day over month, and then day to year to date numbers on each one of those metals and the fluctuation in the pricing. So right. It's a 1 page long. And if you do get that and you see an element and the way it's also broken down, not just pure metals, but it's also set up like global economic data, GDPs, major GDPs, then moving into finance, what the stock market's doing, what the construction, automotive and construction businesses are doing, and some leading economic indicators. Then it gets down into the metals, we kind of have a few, and then the energy sources and so if you'd like a copy of that, just let us know, and we'd get you into the Steel Guys community, and you can read it every morning or whenever you want.
Well, yeah, we'll give a little more information on how to do that, towards the end of the discussion here, right?
Or throughout it, yes.
Yeah, throughout it. Yeah, sure, that's fine. Yeah.
It's steelguys.steelrep.com. You can, and there's a landing page there that kind of describes what the site is all about, and it's what we've got is what we call it says it's a site where we can network with other busy professionals that are involved in the supply chain of metal, and that's the purpose of it. So we've got one-stop shop where you can kind of come in and meet other people that are like-minded people, and and talk about these things like we're talking about here, the metal supply chain.
I think one of the things that you were kind of heading towards is, we talk about iron ore, and for years in our business, we've kind of used, the carbon flat rolled business is kind of as a monitor on what's going on in the metals industry. And then, you certainly have the stainless industry, you've got the aluminum industry, you've got the nickel alloys, special alloys, and all those different kinds of things. We don't necessarily get into all those kind of things. And this even goes back one step further from the carbon flat rolled is the iron ore. We're just, we're looking at the iron ore. Obviously, that's kind of one of the main elements in the beginning of making any of those steel products. So that's kind of, I think, what you were talking about, Jim. We're just using this, on the basis of some of the main categories.
Right, and that being the first part. Then you move down into from there. We move down into the mills, which is taking your thought process there. That's like a 48 wide mill edge coil. Is where you find your base pricing for that. And you put cut edge on there, and take the mill edge off, and have to cut an edge. So you're gonna trim that up. You're gonna add some cost. You got 72 wide. There's not as many mills that do that, so you add some cost there. And you got 36 wides that but again, a 48 wide coil is your base unit where you just roll it up and send it on out.
Right. And again, that's to facilitate this conversation. Certainly, if anybody has any questions or any discussions on any specific markets, we'd love to hear from you. But that's what we're kind of basing this conversation on.
Yeah, and again, globally, the iron ore, that's one of the things I started saying just a second ago. I've been watching this. It's funny how the Chinese market, as the tariffs and the import, so their export market begins to dwindle. They go find other markets to ship their materials to. In the meantime, their domestic market's slowing down, but the cost of their iron ore is what was it? It was cheaper offshore than it was in China. So they actually started importing more iron ore as their mills were slowing down. But again, that was probably a maneuver that you start to see that throughout the thing, and we kind of realized that. So anyway.
Yeah, and you also see another interesting thing as we go through this, that section that we're talking about right now, is that the Chinese are trying to decrease their output, and they're trying to minimize their capacity in an effort to assist in the global overcapacity situation. Certainly the overcapacity situation in their market, but also to assist in the global overcapacity area. But the thing that's interesting to me is that as they continue to try and drop their production in China, they're also talking about increasing their export tonnage, which I found very interesting. But I guess that's because their local market can't support even a reduced capacity. So it's interesting.
You got to keep the mills flowing. You got to keep the mills moving. They're pouring those tons. Got to keep them heated up, I guess, huh?
I guess. Yeah.
One of those things, or you shut them down. That's what we've seen too. You shutter some of those mills that are less efficient.
And that's what they're doing. They're going through and decreasing that area of their production is some of the less efficient and older facilities, which makes sense.
Right. Well, a little comment just came in. I'd like to know the exact duty on stainless steel and on China for the material imported into the USA. I believe that's a tough question. We've had a little question about that because there's the 232s. There's two separate things on different types, like the 409 and different things like that too. I think there's a general 232 on stainless steel at 50%. To all countries, right?
Yes, that's what I understand it to be. But you get into some other ones, and that's a hard question to answer, like you just said, Jim, because you got the 301s as well in there on Chinese on stainless, and then you also not only have the duties, but you have the tariffs, not tariffs. I'm sorry, but the
duties, right?
The duties on the lawsuits, like on coil coming in from from China, there is a duty on that on top of the tariffs. So
Right. I guess that's
I
a good
don't know the
question.
exact number.
Right. That's always been a difficult issue for us, and one of the reasons we as sales reps have always avoided by becoming the owner of record and the importer of record, because we do not. I mean, we've tried and tried and tried to find sources to figure out it, but you have to have the exact what's that code? The code. You have to have the exact product code for the
SIC code or the
yeah.
I know it off the top of my head.
Because
no, man, God, that kills me.
Yeah, NIC or something code or whatever.
Harmonized
tariff
code, HTC.
Correct. The harmonized. You have to have that code, and even that it becomes down like the content of an element in a particular thing. It's just you almost have to be an attorney or you have to be that broker to understand that. And
I think that's one of the things that's a big problem in the market right now, because you even get the derivative products in there, and those have been added onto the tariffs, and that's got to be a very complicated situation, because if half of your product has metal in it and the other product, half has plastics in it, you have to encounter how much. I don't know we don't even get into that, so I have no idea how it works, but that's a great question that you've presented, and we'll do a little more digging to see if we can come up with a definite answer. And
the question is,
next week.
I don't think so. We can only answer the question because he's talking about duties, and there's no way we can come up with every duty. You're not asking, because stainless steel, there is no duty on stainless steel. There's duty on flat rolls. There's stainless flat roll. There's duty on 48 wide flat roll. There's duty on 36 wide flat roll. There's a difference in quarters.
Yeah, well, I guess what you're saying is we need to distinguish duties and tariffs.
Yes, and the question was duties.
Right. And it's not on a generalized category of stainless, to your point.
Correct. Yeah, pipe is different than tube, and stainless steel flanges, stainless steel flat rolls. There's and what you're saying too, those tariffs and the downstream products. That was interesting, like on aluminum, when they started working on the aluminum on those 232s, adding that, jumping that tariff up. The bicycle parts, for example, you imported a bicycle before, there was no duty or there's no tariff on that bicycle. Now, like all the spokes, the rims are made from aluminum. The structure of the bicycle is made from aluminum or whatever. You have to account for that. The rubber tire is different than the spokes, which are made from whatever. So that bicycle becomes subject to tariffs, and there's the accounting nightmare that has to ensue on that one there. But harmonized tariff code, HSN code, yes. CBAM thing is also killing. CBAM.
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah. What's that?
I don't know if that's another the codes. I don't know if that's part of the codes or what. But if you can let us know on that, what the CBAM is what it says. Anyway, moving on to the steel mills and production. Let's see, one of the headlines here, the China's strategic push to trim steel output, which we were just kind of talking about. The Indian steelmakers, Bao Steel, sets sights on exports above, and that's what you were talking about a little while ago, was that there's trying to export.
I jumped ahead a little bit. Sorry about that.
No problem. It was part of that ore and mills moving down into that. And so some of the questions, good question. That's, how do you talk about that? Is could this support margins? So if they do trim output, supply gets less. If they supply is less and demand stays high, it could supply gets less. If they supply is less and demand stays high, it could support a additional margins.
China cutting their capacity, because does that mean they'll ramp theirs up and pick up and continue with the over capacity, and they'll pick up that slack? I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe. Depends upon what the demand does.
Yeah. One thing I'm just noticing here on my I think I probably should have rebooted my computer. We're
Oh,
running a lot of stuff at the same time here. Um, Cross-border adjustment mechanism. Oh, I'm not familiar with that. I've never heard that term. We've been importing for. No, we haven't been importing, but we've been using imported product and talking about that with
CBN or
yeah,
whatever, cross
CBAM
border. Okay.
adjustment
Oh,
mechanism,
okay.
CBAM, and
Oh,
it's a carbon tax thing in Europe apparently. That's we don't do much
oh,
with the European. We used to do back in the 80s, or excuse me, the 90s, probably the European sources. We had a few. We worked with a few on a nickel strip product, but still never heard much of that. That was
yes.
coming in from there, so it's. I'm more not. But back then too, there wasn't as many years now.
Yeah.
We'll have to look into that someday. Um, Down in the Service Center Distributors 232 review with the report doing, that's interesting, making steel, aluminum, and copper.
See that? Maybe aluminum, but
Yeah,
steel, I don't know.
yeah, steel. How can you add steel? I mean, is that the iron ore or is that what is
I
that?
suppose.
So the insight to that is that this signals a potential for renewed import duties that could reshape supply chains and raw material sourcing. So keep an eye out for that. That's something we need to kind of watch out for in the next couple months.
Imagine, but these duties and tariffs and all those kind of things with the uncertainty and it's just it's hard to kind of look ahead a little bit and figure out we're trying to sell to people who are it's very difficult right now, I'm sure, because you don't know
Yeah,
what's going to happen.
yeah, but it's never been really easy. But the swings could be potentially a lot greater. You know, when you talk about 25% instead of just nickel rising as a percentage of the stainless and the surcharge going up or down.
In pricing back then, and now you see, I mean, $20 a ton. I mean, sometimes big moves, 40 to $60 a ton. Not real demand's picking up, supply's been tight, lead times are moving out, so you can kind of count on the mills moving prices up. That's an easy. October 15th, we're going to do this. Okay, that's a that quick. It's hard to react to that.
Actually, that helps our resources a little. That helps our resources a little bit.
I heard it stop. Yeah.
Yeah, the record. Yeah. So to that would be. The thing is, the end user makers push for tougher safeguards, and they're looking at using Brussels to enact U.S. style tariffs, 50% on Chinese steel imports to protect local industries from collapse. So they're finally feeling that too. I didn't realize that's the China didn't realize how much the Europeans had done that. Maybe they've been watching. Didn't realize how much the Europeans had done that. Maybe they've been watching the same things go on. So the rising energy costs and lagging domestic demand. A melted and poured rule is also on the table. That's interesting. The melted and poured rule. So what are the
For the
downstream?
United States, does that for the United States, or that melted and poured rule? Is that what that's talking about?
For EU?
The EU, that melted and poured rule. Is that what that's talking about?
For EU?
The EU. Okay. All right. That's why I was questioning that. That sounded like it was for the EU, right? Okay.
Yeah, but we've got some of this. I mean, you got some of that same concepts going on here with a lot of the products. You know, we used to see that
Some.
in fittings as well. You know, they'd make the shell and just go put a bevel on it, and they'd ship it over to a different country. They'd make it in China, ship it package it and stamp it and melt and send off the thing. The
Well,
market and pricing trends. You know, iron ore remains a volatile. How that's done that while the outlook in China has tight. Investor caution persists with slim gains in iron ore. Okay, so that's the beginning. Again, as we were talking, sometimes it takes a little while for something like iron ore to have its influence downstream into the mills, into the service. I don't know what the cost percentage is, you know, because you have all those other. Yeah, that's one.
never looked that one up.
All right, so U.S. critical global commodity flows. That'll be interesting. Again, global commodity flows. That'll be interesting. Again, that I want the cheapest. I mean, if you can produce it cheaper somewhere else, that's your prerogative. You start to have the dynamics with that. You've got the labor. You start to have the dynamics with that. You've got the labor. Can you use quote slave labor, or even again, I don't. If you can get away with paying somebody cheaper prices, that's fine. And if you can get your electricity made at a cheaper price as well, mental factors that again, I don't know if you don't want to make clean, have your environment clean and you dirty it up with steel, is that your prerogative? I mean, we did it in the United States for many years as we were developing an economy. The late 1800s, the industrial age here, in early 1900s, it took us through the 70s, 80s, 90s to, change a lot of that, clean up a lot of that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and a lot of people are still catching up to that, and they can still pour pickling acid out into the the local rivers and kill all the fish downstream, whatever. But that the regulations that have been imposed on the U.S. market here, that's the fair playing field. We've talked about that for 30 years, so it needs to be a fair playing field. And I don't know that it'll ever get to one. I mean, like you said, though, what's fair? If the United States needs to pay their employees $30 an hour and country X only needs to pay their employees $10 an hour. Right. But yeah, when you harm the environment and people and
the rest of their life because they're working for $10 an hour here now, as opposed to our guys, they don't get anything in retirement. You kind of have to fund your own retirement. So, but the cost of steel is based on your current labor rate. So the government's in one hand, you could say that the government was subsidizing, the lower cost wages by paying for the retirement, out of their pocket. So they're just delaying the inevitable. So, I mean, again, there's so many factors like that you have to look at.
Yes. Well,
not just the overall cost, but I mean, there's a lot of influences that you don't even know I mean, you got to look at all the factors influencing that. If one country, it costs 20 cents a kilowatt hour in steel, and that's a major cost of, electricity. But the government's picking up 10 cents, or, they're saying, oh, we'll build the dam, we'll make electricity, and electricity is free for you. How does that work? I mean,
yeah.
The government says,
like you said, there's so many different complexities that you can evaluate from one country to the next, and
gotta be fair. I want to play. Gotta be fair. I want to play. I want to play. All right. So wrapping up. Next steps. Recap. A balancing act is underway between Chinese production. Like that. That is a nice little recap of kind of what we've talked about here today. And now the outlook. Expect continued volatility. Yeah. Track policy shifts, price data, and trade announcements closely. And that's kind of what we do here, each week. Kind of do that. We're going to outlook. We're going to keep tracking those policy shifts, the pricing data, and trade announcements. Anything that comes up there, we'll try to track those and talk about. We'll try to track those and talk about them here each week. And the next session, we'll consider deep dive sessions into regional price comparisons: China versus India versus EU. That's amazing. Okay. Emerging demand in green steel sectors.
Well, along with those green steel productions come new news, I guess, is what that statement said, right? Keep an eye
on Tuesday of next week. Try out the 10 o'clock hour. So I kind of saying, well, let's wrap it up here, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Fortunately, the audio didn't mess up, I don't think, but. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Sounds